All right, you guys, arguably the most important thing when it comes to bass fishing is the connection between you and the fish. In other words, your line. You got your braided line, you got your fluorocarbon line. It can be kind of tricky to pick between the two for any given situation. So today we're gonna run through some key characteristics and some pros and cons between braided line and fluorocarbon. Right away, the first thing I kind of think about is that braid floats and fluorocarbon sinks. Another characteristic between the two is that braid has no stretch and fluorocarbon has very minimal stretch. And one more thing to touch on is braid obviously has a lot more visibility, whereas fluorocarbon has almost no visibility. So those are just some of the main key differences between the two. So let's jump into one of the uses for braid, and that's topwaters. Obviously braid floats, and braid casts a mile. So I can huck whatever I'm throwing topwater as far as I can. So I'm thinking about my walking baits or my popping baits, I'm gonna reach more towards 20 to 30 pound test. And then if I'm frogging and super thick stuff, I'm gonna reach for probably more like 50 pound test. So when I'm fishing super thick vegetation, I'm always gonna reach for braid. Think big rods, big weights. Braid's got a thin diameter, so it's a lot easier to cut through that thick vegetation. So in those situations, when it's super thick cover, it's a heavy weight, I'm really reefing fish out of that stuff, I'm gonna reach for 50 to 65 pound braid. And one final thing to think about is braid as my main line on spinning reels. There's a lot of braids coming out now that are super thin in diameter, can cast a mile, but are also super strong. And all of these braids, anywhere from 8 pound test to 12 pound test, can be used for a variety of different techniques, whether you're throwing a shaky head, drop shot in grass, or you're getting finesse, throwing tiny fuzzy dice, maybe a jig and minnow. A thin diameter braid works super well for all these applications. Now let's get into some of the applications for fluorocarbon lines. One of the first things that comes to mind is treble hook baits, your jerk baits, your crank baits. One thing that's great about fluorocarbon is if I'm throwing a crankbait and I hook into a fish in a little bit deeper water, I have so much more forgiveness in that fight with fluorocarbon due to the minimal stretch. A little bit of forgiveness, a little bit of stretch definitely goes a long way as far as keeping fish pinned. So with that, let's talk about more finesse applications with fluorocarbon. Something to think about is how important fluorocarbon is in clear water. Fluorocarbon is extremely low vis. Also, fluorocarbon is really nice as a leader for your braided main line, using your spinning gear for a finesse presentation like drop shotting, or throwing a jig and minnow, other finesse presentations. A good fluorocarbon leader helps your bait look as natural as possible. Some techniques that come to mind is throwing 17 pound test fluorocarbon for a jig, or 12 pound test fluorocarbon fishing a jerk bait over a rock pile. But fluorocarbon's also used really well for close quarter combat. I think about flipping wood or flipping docks, and fluorocarbon's super abrasion resistant, so I don't really have to worry about fraying my line so much. And another thing to think about is the minimal stretch that fluorocarbon has. So if I'm flipping docks and I hook into a big one 10 feet from the boat, I've got a little bit of forgiveness rather than pulling the hook right out of their face. So there's kind of a rundown between fluorocarbon line and braided line, and hopefully this helps you guys narrow down when to reach for either your fluorocarbon or your braid.